All right, so thank you very much for waiting for this elaborate setup to be made. We're going to have a panel which is going to close today's conference or today's edition. We have almost all of the previous speakers with the exception of Edan who left. So would you please welcome Alexei Zamiatin, also Sergio, Orkun, Janus is the one who will be moderating, I guess. And we also have Rena Shah. Is it Shah or Shah?
Shah, like Shah 256.
Like Shah, king in Persian.
I like Shah 256.
Are we rolling? I think we're good to go. We got a little countdown clock here too. This is nice setup. I really like the venue a lot, actually. I think the venue's actually quite sick. But guys, how is everyone doing today? How are we feeling?
Great.
Feeling good after all the travel. Token 2049, I bet, was a bit rough to come all the way over from Singapore, but it feels good. Cool. We're going to talk about L2s. Everyone in the room, just share, showcase of hands. Who's familiar with what's going on in the L2 space right now? There's 50 Bitcoin L2s, 100 Bitcoin L2s, but they're not L2s because L2s aren't real. Just like birds aren't real, L2s aren't real. I don't think a lot of people got that reference, but I just want to get your guys' the topic of the panel is to separate the hype from reality. I think everyone here is building actually really exciting things and is doing a lot of research and upcoming upgrades. So I just want to get your guys' take on what's going on in the space, what you think caused all this interest and caused all of this development, and what you think are some of your not your own projects, but other projects you're actually really looking at and thinking about. They're doing really interesting research. So I guess let's start with Orkun. What's your overall thoughts?
I think I'm a bit on the side that these are not L2s if they don't have unilateral exits. But apart from the technical points, yeah, I think all of the people here were here before the booming Bitcoin L2s. Obviously, Stacks and Rootstock were building for years. And I think I met with Alexei before all the L2 hype came up this year. Obviously, Bitcoin is very valuable asset. So if there's something to build on, people will start building on. But a lot of these people is also here for just grabbing the quick money and leaving. But you are doing us work to just determine which one is the good or which one is the worst. But yeah.
So favorite projects outside of Citrea, or you're looking at Rootstock and Stacks as things you think are really interesting?
Not favorite projects. If they would favorite, I wouldn't build Citrea. But I obviously admire a lot of technical choices they did. And I also learn from their mistakes, which is good for me.
Okay, cool. And Sergio, you've been building in the space for, what, 10, 12 years now?
Yeah.
What's your take on the new side chains coming to market, new L2s? What's your overall take, and what are you looking forward to the most?
So I was talking with Rina in the backstage about how difficult it is to transform a working system, change consensus like Stack is doing, or change the bridge like Rootstock wants to do. And you have to be very, very conservative. You have to plan. There will be lots of audits, a lot of testing, and these are projects that take 2 years or maybe take 1 year in our case. While the new projects, they don't have money, it's already locked. They don't have 3,000 Bitcoins that can be lost that belong to the people. So obviously they can go experiment and, if it falls, it's maybe they don't lose anything. But for projects that are well established, we have to be very conservative. So I think I was the only one that I proposed a roadmap for our transformation that was a 1 year time. And all the other projects, obviously, they say, okay, let's do it in 4 months, right? So it's very difficult to do something production ready in 4 months. But I understand that you can take a lot more risks if you are starting from zero. So that's how I see it. The ones that have more time in this ecosystem are much more conservative. Even if we are embracing the latest technology, we will take more time to make all the necessary reviews for the technology to be sound.
Okay, and Reina, I want to build on that really quickly. What's it been like working in the Stacks ecosystem, going through the Nakamoto upgrade, and then also going into the SBTC upgrade? What's the overall planning, strategically thought process going into all of that, and yeah, just want to get some insight there.
Well, I guess that the Nakamoto upgrade that all of you have alluded to is the most important thing for stacks. We're essentially ripping out the entire consensus mechanism of stack and upgrading the stack to have Bitcoin finality 100%. So if Bitcoin reorgs, stack will have to reorg as well. So virtually impossible to hack stacks because we're going to have to reorg Bitcoin first. But what's like really interesting about this kind of L2 stack and like where we're all sitting at is Stacks has been one of the OGs alongside Rootstock, and like we together have created the entire narrative of building on Bitcoin, L2s, all of these things came from the work that we've always believed in the vision that Bitcoin needed to scale with products and dApps, and no one really thought about that for many years, but a few builders that were contrarians always figured that re-harnessing Bitcoin security was the right way to go because you have a solid bedrock. On the SBTC side, each one of our projects have like our own way of how we're bridging Bitcoin in and basically deploying it on an L2. Stacks is launching SBTC. But I think what really matters is the idea of on-chain Bitcoin that can be deployed in DeFi and like other activities. And for us, what we're kind of most bullish about is really unlocking Bitcoin DeFi more so than anything else. So we're building different protocols and DEXs to kind of bring any form of all of our equivalent Bitcoins together.
Okay, very cool. And then Alexei, you've been researching Bitcoin bridges for years. There seems to be a lot of, I guess, skepticism around BitVM at times. What's kind of your response to that? And do you look at like the bridged conversation as competitive? Do you look at like soft forks and the soft fork proposals as being competitive with BitVM, or do you view those things as like more complementary?
I mean, well, whether competitive or complementary is hard to say because there's so many different ones. Of course, like if we could get to a point where we can execute a full ZK verifier in script without, having to do it off-chain and optimistic, that would be great. I mean, I think we all believe that that is ideally what the future should look like. On the other hand, the question is how practical will that be? How long will it take us to agree on what kind of opcode gets added? Do we agree at all? And one thing that I've learned is not to bet on these things. I would not bet my business on Bitcoin changing. I mean, the whole point of Bitcoin, if you talk to a lot of people that hold BTC, is like, well, it's predictable. It doesn't change often. So I generally think it's synergetic because the infrastructure that is built around BitVM2 is likely going to be applicable to the bridge designs, even if OPCAT happens. I still think that it's likely going to be too expensive for most Bitcoin layer 2s, especially ones that are newer and don't have millions of users, to really continuously execute these on-chain proofs. And as such, they will likely use fraud-proof designs as well, and then it's actually synergetic because with OPCAT, you get rid of some of the trusted setup assumptions in BitVM2. You can use a Stark instead of a Snark, and you can actually also reduce the costs of like the fraud proofs. So that actually is quite synergetic, and if we had OPCAT, BitVM would be much easier, and we'd probably also be talking about, optimizing Snark or Stark verifiers in script right now rather than fraud proofs, but we don't have it, and I don't know if we will, so that's why we focus on what's possible. And my general take was, okay, if there is really consensus on a fork, we probably know at least 6 months in advance. I would assume it's not something that happens overnight. So being pragmatic, then even with the 6 months is a lot of time if you want to build something. So yeah.
So we're going to push for opgroth16 verify.
Sorry?
opgroth16 verify.
You're not going to get me to say that I like one soft fork or the other.
Okay, so I think though the big thing that's changing from maybe like the last 4 to 5 years is the discussion around the bridging mechanism to peg Bitcoin into some smart contract and mint the token on the other side. We're improving that, so that gives us, like what you mentioned earlier, Alexei, close to kind of the trust assumption that L2s or rollups might have in Ethereum. That's kind of the consensus, I would say. Orkun, when did you guys start thinking about building this type of rollup on Bitcoin? Because you were doing this before the bridge, kind of the explosion in bridge design and research happened.
So like from our observation, it was like early last year, like with ordinals that I mentioned on my presentation as well. There was like a lot of activity on Bitcoin L1, and Bitcoin L1 couldn't scale that activity, obviously. And the other like side systems or L2s, they also failed to get the traction of these activity. and just like offload some of the load from Bitcoin. So our idea was, okay, let's build a rollup on Bitcoin where people can do much more expressive stuff than it's already exists on the L1. So the idea wasn't actually scale like 100x, but it was more like scaling the ability of Bitcoin by adding a general purpose VM so people can actually deploy applications like privacy applications, like exchange, and those applications will be secured just by Bitcoin, nothing else, and people will use their assets on that platform so they don't bloat the L1 UTXO set, for example. So it wasn't actually start from like the scaling perspective, but more like bringing more features to Bitcoin. And our initial bridge design, this was I think May last year, was your paper called Exclaim, right? It's like the base of like I think SBTC2. So our design was also like based on this idea where there's a like maybe Tether, USDT, or like some other currency that over-collateralize the bridge, and you can bridge Bitcoin. So it was permissionless federation, basically, with economic security. But then with BitVM paper, we just allocated our ZK team to BitVM, which like full of gold and silver medalists in Olympiads. So they're like extremely smart guys. And I think in a couple of weeks, they said to me that, okay, we can actually build a ZK verifier using this primitive. And we did a hacker house. We were already in communicating with you back then. So we implemented this 0 version of BitVM in Rust and kind of validated the idea and then started working on the bridge. So it was almost a year ago that we started working on a BitVM-based bridge, but it was more than a year ago that we started building a rollup.
Okay, very cool. And I think so that with that context in mind, like we're working towards having these more improved trust assumptions on the bridging side, SBTC, various variations of BitVM. Looking past that, what are the applications that do you think these types of side systems can provide? So like I look at Arc and Lightning, mainly focusing on like payments. What when we look at these kind of like sidechain EVM-based systems, I know Stacks is doing Clarity, like what type of applications do you guys think are going to be interesting and bring more users onto these systems?
I mean, you can do everything.
Yeah.
Right, that's the whole selling point. I can do payments. I can send you Bitcoin. It's fast. It's almost as fast as Lightning. It's cheaper.
Yeah, but it's an
an
account-based model, and it's completely public. And I don't know if that's like well suited for payments.
You can do privacy.
It's debatable.
It's debatable.
But you can also plug it into. But then you also can plug it through Tornado Cash if you really want. I'm not advocating for this on camera, by the way, please. But you know, you could. So I think that's the advantage. You're more flexible, and it's more accessible to builders. Versus on Lightning, you're constrained to only doing payments, which is fine.
Yeah.
But for apps.
Yeah, I think that, of course, you can even improve Lightning with channel factories. And there is a lot to do with BitVMX or BitVM on that side. I still think that connecting to sidechains or rollups is the main application because now you get to access to privacy. And the thing is that, and we might differ in this point, but Bitcoin can be very, very costly at congestion time. Relying on Bitcoin space as data availability when there is congestion is obviously super painful. It won't work for financial inclusion. It won't work for privacy-preserving payments or confidential payments. So for me, it's let's build layers too. Let's connect them in the most trust-minimized way, and then we can do everything on those systems. And I really want, apart from Rootstock, to be other competing systems. And later on, those systems can be interconnected. And that's how the Bitcoin layer 2 ecosystem grows, is when these different solutions get interconnected. And so you won't mind if you're using Bitcoin to do payments over Lightning, but in the same wallet, you will be using your same Bitcoins to do DeFi on Rootstock. But you just wouldn't mind where the Bitcoins are because you know they are equally secure.
Like the most basic case, I think, is buying Bitcoin. That everyone here is using exchange to buy Bitcoin. But like with Citrea, there's a world that you can actually have like fiat pegged or stable pegged like coin that is backed by Bitcoin, and you can hold it anytime, and then you can buy Bitcoin without asking to anyone, without going through any custodial or centralized exchange. And by still holding like these Bitcoin-backed tokens, you will still get the Bitcoin security if you are just running a Bitcoin core node. So I think that's like very good improvement over the existing landscape. But yeah, there are a lot of ways to like improve these solutions, and they obviously make trade-offs. Nothing is perfect. Like some, like merge mining sidechains, they're good, but they're not equally Bitcoin secure. They have another assumption which like X% of the miners will be honest, and they can be dishonest by being honest on Bitcoin main chain too. So that's a very strong assumption, but still it's a trade-off and it's cheap. So people will simply find their way using which one is better suited for their needs.
And what do you think from like, I think you're the only team represented up here that's not doing the EVM. So like from the application perspective, how do you guys think about this, and what are you seeing that's like really exciting coming up in the market?
For us, like the most interesting thing that we're kind of orchestrating and building towards is restaking with Bitcoin. So the idea of using BTC capital for economic security to build your protocols on top. And so for us, what we were really thinking about is we could have gone EVM, like that could have been a path, but many Bitcoiners don't quite agree with anything that touches proof of stake. And so we really wanted to stay kind of true to proof of work by recycling it. And that's why Clarity kind of took that approach. But from like an application standpoint, in the Stacks community, we're kind of divided across different verticals. Most of our builders are in DeFi. Everybody just wants to use BTC on chain and deploy it however they wish to do. Think about like what would have happened if like BlockFi was on chain. None of us would have been wrecked. And so like just basic use cases that exist that we take for granted in all other ecosystems have never been built on Bitcoin until like this standpoint.
Okay, so the idea is that maybe another way to look at it is like we're leveling up. Like we're getting Bitcoin applications or Bitcoin-centric applications to a place where they're similar to what people are doing on Ethereum or other ecosystems today. Is that a way to look at it, that we're just like leveling up and getting there, or are we trying to maybe differentiate from a market perspective?
I think, so I often get asked this question, what can you do on Bitcoin L2s that you can't do on Ethereum today? And that's the wrong question. You can do everything you can do on Ethereum, right? And once we have Bitcoin secured bridges and we actually get to this place where we're always working towards, you can do everything that you can do on Ethereum with Bitcoin. But as you said, you're leveling the playing field. So far, like you can do a lot of things on the Ethereum side, and everybody just picks Ethereum when they build their new product. They don't go to Bitcoin. Because, like, I mean, it's so hard, the go-to-market is slow, you take years instead of months. And from business perspective, right now, ETH is the right choice. You have the network effect, you have the liquidity and institutional integrations. Well, that's what the first thing that's the first thing we need to achieve, is we need to level the playing field, because otherwise, if we always keep chasing Ethereum, they've had billions of dollars of capital pumped into the system. They build very good products, very good infrastructure. It's not going to stop. So if you do something completely different, you know, we're going to have a hard time catching up. And I think that is what kind of has always kind of concerned me about this, the Lightning side of things. It lacks pragmatism, and we have to be pragmatic. Like, Bitcoin is not going to change a lot. Well, we have ways to build things on top of Bitcoin, which will ideally accrue fees back to Bitcoin as well. And instead of having all the Bitcoin go to other networks, well, it could be it could be used within an ecosystem that is built on top of BTC itself. But ideally, if we actually want to get to that point, and I'm of the strong opinion, like, we have to offer a similar service as an ETH L2 does or Solana does. If we cannot get there, people will not go to Bitcoin L2s. And yes,
Sergio, I want to bring you in on this, because you guys have had this system that's been EVM compatible for years. So what from your perspective, how are you kind of looking forward and thinking about the future development roadmap?
Yeah, so at the beginning, imagine we bring EVM compatibility into the hands of Bitcoin maxis. Like, what, are you crazy? Like, it was very hard to bring, but my stance was that, you know, it doesn't matter what VM you are using. It matters that you have developers behind it, pushing it forward and programming it and creating libraries and creating toolchain, right? That's what matters. And bringing EVM to Bitcoin was the best decision we could ever make, because now we have all the developers writing Solidity code, all the experience in writing Solidity code. Even if at the beginning there were plenty of security problems, they are now gone. Now we are using new opcodes to prevent rentrancy attacks and all kinds of problems that had in the past. And so we are in the best possible scenario. What is the main difference between Rootstock and the ecosystem that is being created around Bitcoin L2s compared to Ethereum is that Ethereum at some point in time will have a token fragmentation problem. Like currently, it's positive, like you get a lot of capital because each new L2 has its own token, so everybody gets money, we are built, but at the end, long term, these are different tokens with different alignments. So how is the base layer going to respond to that? It's going to be left behind, or what? And what we are building on top of Bitcoin is a single, we all believe in Bitcoin as a storage of value, and that unites us. And so I think that even if in the short term we get less interest for some, VCs, in the long term, it's a winning situation.
Maybe to add, I do disagree with you here. I
Yeah,
think
no.
Rejecting, like, one of the things that makes, blockchain has existed for long before Bitcoin. The technology was there. What made it work was a financial aspect. And I do think that rejecting any other asset than Bitcoin is dangerous, because there are reasons to have other tokens.
Totally.
A lot of them are nonsense, speculation. But how did Bitcoin start? Like online casinos, poker. So I think, and that's, I think, also something that we've seen change in the Bitcoin community, which I find is important. Everybody should be able to use these technologies for what they see fit. As long, of course, I'm not like, there's a lot of illegal stuff that you should not be doing, right? But why is my use case better than yours? It's not. Like, if I want to, that's the same with ordinals. If I want to put data on Bitcoin, I should be able to do so. And if I want to make a new token, I should be able to do so because, well, maybe I think it's a good reason. I mean, of course, if I'm trying to promote a scam, that's terrible, of course. But there's a lot of legit use cases out there that use other digital asset forms. And that, I do think, is something L2s will enable also on Bitcoin. So I don't see that kind of being too different from what you see in Ethereum. It's just going to be on Bitcoin, and the fees will accrue to Bitcoin for people who experiment.
Yeah, I love experimentation. I see there's no two sides. It's just a gamut of possibilities. Like, you can just create any number of spammy tokens, and that's one, just to pump them, or you can be a maximalist. And there is some positions in the middle. Mm-hmm. Like, you can have a governance token to change your consensus, for example. But I'm more inclined to the maxi side than to the other kind of side. I think it has some perverse incentives. But yeah, there is a gamut of possibilities there.
I want to add one really simple point that maybe we haven't talked on. All of us in our own L2 landscape are doing the unsung hero work, because think about what is Bitcoin right now. Most ETFs went live this year, right? So we have more and more Bitcoin going into bank custody, where all of us are taking our own approach for people to do on-chain activity, and that is the entire point.
Yeah. So, but I want to build on, that's a really good point, because it's about ensuring it doesn't go into the bank, so we don't have to scale with custodial solutions. But a thing I want to talk about now is something you both were kind of just mentioning earlier, is the alignment. So for example, if you are some L2 system and you have a token and you want to make that useful, you might build some consensus protocol that does something else, and let's say it's a sequencer, and you have this new sequencer with a token. What if the token accrues in value and eventually becomes this really big thing? Then you have to make that decision of what you're aligning with. Are you aligning with your token, or are you aligning with Bitcoin? There could be these decisions down the road where you could have splits in alignment and maybe breaking away from being a Bitcoin L2 because it's not in the best interest of the project. What do you guys think about the necessity of aligning with Bitcoin, the asset, and aligning with Bitcoin miners long term? Because that's something the security budget's a topic and all these different things.
I'm going to bring Stacks example, but in the good sense. Stacks, in the beginning, there was some attacks from Bitcoin miners against Stacks because there was not good alignment. And now they have changed that. They are much closer in alignment with Bitcoin to combine those communities. And I think that's positive. But there was a time where there was not clear alignment between those two groups.
Yeah, Stacks got a lot of hell because obviously we have a token and it's used for gas. That's the purpose of the token. Mm-hmm. But when you mine a Stacks block, you must commit Bitcoin. And that Bitcoin is securing to Bitcoin miners too. And so it's a symbiotic relationship that we're always going to do something good back for Bitcoin. So when you stack Stacks, your native yield is BTC. It is not the Stacks token. And so we've always believed that any L2, whatever your consensus is, if you're not doing something good back for Bitcoin security budget or miners, it's not worth it.
Okay. Orkun, you're paying,
Yeah.
you're gonna pay a lot of money in DA fees. So
Yeah, like in our case, we are just specifically choosing Bitcoin as DA layer. The first reason is it is the only way to get like 100% security, including the double spend resistance and the data availability guarantees. And the second is to be aligned with Bitcoin, because what we should like build on Bitcoin shouldn't just extract value from Bitcoin. It should bring value to Bitcoin. And what we do is just a mathematical compression of transactions to make them cheaper than the main chain. But all the compressed transactions still go to the L1 and pay a lot of DA fees to Bitcoin miners. There are a lot of stuff that you can maybe like just have a percentage of the miners that secure something and gets the reward. But in this case, you are just paying by like in-round payments simply. You are just paying in the block. So even if it's a like pool, all the money goes to the miners, not to the pool, for example, depending on their payment scheme. But yeah, that's why we choose Bitcoin as the layer. But obviously, we have a lot of plans to like improve it. Our plan is to like not divide the user base into like someone that doesn't want to pay any Bitcoin fee and one wants to pay a fee to Bitcoin. So in that case, we are building volition model, which you simply divide the blockchain into two, but they're still interoperable because they are the same blockchain. But one half of the blockchain sends data to some off-chain place, and the other half sends to the on-chain, which is the Bitcoin. So we give option to the users instead of taking option as like the protocol builders. And we think this is the best way to align with Bitcoin. If people want to align with Bitcoin, they can. If not, they cannot. But we are not the ones that's making this decision.
And Alexei, anything to add on that?
I mean, I think there needs to be an alignment, obviously, right? I mean, think about in like 3.5 years when the next halving happens, and the next halving, and the next halving, right? None of the Bitcoin L2s will work if Bitcoin's economic security model breaks. And there's a very good paper about, what happens to Bitcoin without the block reward, and, when you start seeing instabilities, that could occur because of like game theoretic results of, blocks being worth a lot compared, like block A is worth a lot, the next one is not. But on the other side, is it really the right time to extract value from new L2s on day one? No, probably not. So what I would like to personally see is this stronger alignment between Bitcoin consensus participants, the mining pools and the mining operators, with the new builders. And I think that's already happening. Because sure, like let's say you use merge mining, you post data to Bitcoin, use staking. Staking is maybe a bit different, but like if you're actually just paying fees to the L1, that makes sense. But you don't start extracting value from something that's new, a startup, something new that could grow on day one. You try to make it grow more, make it cheaper, and then once we've actually managed to scale this, then the fees will accrue. So I think there needs to be a balance found between these two kind of sides of like the Bitcoin community. Because think about it, if Bitcoin L2s are much more expensive than ETH L2s or Solana, I don't think people are going to use them. And we can prevent that, right? There can be subsidies, it can be made cheaper. There can be also changes to Bitcoin that could make this cheaper in the future. So I think that's a conversation that is to be had if Bitcoin L2s are to be competitive. Because again, we're not building in isolation. And I don't think, like if you zoom out from this conference, from even the Ethereum world, the millions of new users, they really won't care if it settles on Bitcoin or not. If they have a secure way to use Bitcoin, they will prefer that. But BitVM can also be used to bridge Bitcoin to other chains. Mm-hmm. And here we have to be careful, right? If Bitcoin is, and L2s on Bitcoin are always going to be more expensive and slower than what you can do on other networks, well, then we have a problem. So that's, I think, alignment, yes, but there needs to be also, I guess, compromise, especially initially.
Okay, yeah. And we're up on time here, and I know that Rootstock Labs is hosting a party tonight. We don't want to miss that. So I just wondering, any final thoughts, like what in terms of like next steps on research? Like these sound like some interesting problems that you've just brought up. Like what do you think as an ecosystem we could potentially do to accelerate this development and accelerate the discussion around potential solutions to the things we talked about today?
I've said so much, right? I guess on BitVM it's collaboration, right? That's why we try to contribute to like the BitVM2 research. So there's like a proper write-up for BitVM2 that then everybody can contribute to and use. And I just don't believe in everybody, taking their own thing and like building in isolation. It's good in some cases, but as long as you contribute back. And I think that's already happening, and it's great to see.
Yeah. So BitVM only happened a year ago, and we started as soon as the paper was published. We found better and better and better. We improve it all the time. We are still improving it. Like the improvements that I presented that we are going to open source soon, these are things that anyone can use. And I'm pretty sure that the moment we publish a paper with some advancement, then Alexei will come and will take that and make it better. So I think we are still in a steep curve of innovation, and the system that we build in 1 year maybe will be different than the systems that we are building now. So you have to be prepared for new discoveries that will completely reshape this VM ecosystem.
Yeah, I think for developers, I definitely agree. And for users, I think the best thing to do right now is just experimenting all of these solutions, like trying all the new things and determining which one is the best for use case and which kind of security level you are fine to trust with to the solution, and just experiment with this, because if you find fit for your needs, then you can just use it instead of just being skeptical and doing nothing with your Bitcoin.
I think it's well known that Stacks was publicly the first L2 to support BitVM and is actually funding most of the research, and so there's always been alignment. But what actually I'm drawing from all of us is that we all together, all the L2s are actually working together in its own possible ways to actually bring something back to Bitcoin, and none of us are working in isolation. All of us are quite friendly and open about what we're building.
So I guess to separate the hype from reality, teams producing legitimate research consistently, upgrading their protocols on a consistent basis, and that are collaborating in public and not building in isolation and are being very clear about the trust assumptions related to the protocols. That's a good way to sum up splitting the hype from the reality?
Yeah.
Cool. I think we're good.
So before you guys go, I'd like to take the opportunity to say how awesome it is to have you guys all up here going, no, I've got the best solution. It's fucking amazing, yeah? Bitcoin is exciting again. Some of the top people in the space, thank you so much for joining us here. Really, I have so much respect for every one of you.